moved to Venice, and I saw all these homeless animals on the street, starving and maimed, and I thought, oh my God, and I started pulling them into my house, and pulling them into my house, and pulling them into my house. At that point I thought, why don't I start an animal protection organization so we can do things maybe a little differently, offer different services to the community? And that's when I decided to start Voice for the Animals. What could I do that would be different, that would help the community? We started the Animal Rescue Hotline. What I found out is the first thing people needed is just someone to talk to. They needed advice. They had an animal in front of them that was in jeopardy and they wanted to know what to do. Second thing I realized is some people wanted to keep their animals, but they were disabled or they were chronically ill, but it was an economic issue. One group of people that we seemed to get a lot of calls from were elderly people who were on fixed incomes. And when we would visit their homes, we would see that instead of them buying medicine for themselves, they would buy food and medicine for their animals. Well, we couldn't have that. That's just horrible to have to make that choice. So I thought, wait a minute, if I can raise some money and give these people food, vet bills, they could keep their animals. Another aspect of the hotline was I realized people sometimes could not keep their animals for whatever reason. And most of these animals, cats and dogs, were older. They'd lived in their home for a long time. It was painful for the animal, painful for the person to be separated from them. So what we began to do is, instead of taking puppies and kittens, which are very easy to adopt out, we took the older animals. And one day as I was driving through the Palisades, I saw this open bank lot, and I thought, that would be a great place to hold our adoptions, and we do today, corner Swarthmore and Sunset. A board member had an idea for us to go into the shelters, and as we were economically able to expand, we began going into the shelters, taking animals out on their last day. For instance, Duncan, whose leg had been so severely mangled, he had to be in a cast for a year. He's now in a wonderful home. The next one is Pearl, who was returned to the shelter twice, and every time you dangle keys or anything metal, she freaks out. She's in a perfect home now. And then the most dramatic was Lily. One of our friends saw her in the shelter. She had no use of her back legs at all. But slowly we began a rehab program for Lily. She slowly began to crawl, and then she actually stood up. That was a landmark day for all of us to see Lily stand. And then she slowly began to walk. And then she began to run. It was amazing. And then she got her perfect home. Well, we got a call from a minister at a church on the corner of San Julian and 7th.
We're here at the Amazing Grace Church in downtown Skid Row, and the pastor here and his wife have been housing and feeding cats for the past decade, dozens and dozens of cats, but they sold the church, and now the cats, well, they must go. The good people from Voice for the Animals have been here since 5 a.m. setting up their have-a-heart traps with a little tuna fish inside. They estimate about 50 felines are on the ground, and they aim to capture all these little guys before the day is done, then take the cats and the kittens to their LA facility and hopefully find them loving homes.
We realized that there was indeed a larger problem on Skid Row. There were hundreds of unspayed, unneutered cats, and there were also a lot of homeless people who had dogs who they couldn't afford to feed and who were unspayed and neutered. So we developed a huge program for Skid Row, which is in effect to today, in which we either take the animals out if they are domestic, or we set up feeding stations if they're feral. There's one group of animals in the shelter that always tugged at my heart. It was the feral cats, because they're routinely put down since they're not adoptable. And I thought, wait a minute, we can do something here. One day I was walking the flower mart and I saw this guy coughing. And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, they spray poison to get rid of the rats. And I said, does it work? He said, no. And he said, everybody gets really sick. And I said, well, that's insane. So I went to the head of the flower mart and I said, hey, why don't we try cats? And after I founded the Working Cats program, which now is not only in the flower mart, there's 3 police stations that have working cats. People came from Russia to see how this program works because they want to institute it in Russia. One of the things I'm most proud of in the 15 years that I've been doing Voice for the Animals is our relationship with the Los Angeles Police Department. When I met Commander Smith 15 years ago, he and I became fast friends.
I started working with Voice for the Animals about 15 years ago when I was a sergeant out in Venice Beach, and have been working with them for years on a bunch of different projects. They do so much good all over the city.
So we worked for months and years, actually, to put together the Animal Cruelty Task Force. They go out and they arrest people who are doing horrific things to animals. People in this city really need to see how compassionate LAPD is and how many officers on their job rescue animals from horrible situations, and they take them home, become part of their family. So every year now we have Rescued by the LAPD calendar featuring different officers with their rescue animals with a story of how they rescued them, and it's so heartwarming and so amazing. Another program which is very dear to my heart is the Human Education program. I realize how important it is to go into the schools and teach kids about compassion. It's wonderful to see how these kids then get involved with various animal groups and become volunteers. In 1996, I was teaching at Crossroads in a high school context. One year I asked the kids, what do you want to focus on? And they said elephants, and I knew nothing about elephants, so I thought, okay, we'll all learn together.
The kids from the New Roads and Crossroads schools say there's not enough space for the elephants to roam. They want to send them to a wildlife sanctuary.
The LA Zoo's 4 elephants are among its most popular animals, but a group of students insist the pachyderms need to go for their own good.
The students decided they wanted to appear in front of the commissions, the Zoo Commission, which they did, and they spoke, and they were laughed at.
Our goal is not to shut the LA Zoo down at all. I mean, we think that certain animals do fine in a zoo environment. Elephants are the particular species that do the worst.
The students were ignored. And they started writing letters to the district attorney, city attorney, and then one day in our box at Crossroads arrived a packet of documented abuse of the elephants at the LA Zoo. So we decided to make a film, at least we could educate people. So we made a film called Elephants and Man. And that was the beginning of the whole education of the elephant issue. It spread to people, people could see it, they could see exactly what the history of elephants was, and how elephants came into captivity, and how these few students made such a difference by being a voice for these animals.